Hello, so my usual Tuesday video has been postponed. It is Wednesday, in fact, and I have some stuff I really want to talk about, but I feel like it's kind of still distilling in my mind, it's still in my body and my soul. It's still kind of working its way through me, so I'm just sort of waiting until that feels a little bit more settled to share some other stuff. But I thought I would do a little share on what's been going on with me recently, because I feel like there's probably some codes in it for other people, as we're all, one big collective consciousness. So so those of you that know me a bit more closely know that my background prior to stepping into my work as a healer, psychic, mystic, whatever, was in poetry, was in performance, particularly within performing my own poetry, my own work. And it's kind of one of those things where I didn't have that usual gateway into poetry that a lot of people have, where they do a lot of open mics and they do a lot of like free work before they actually start getting paid for gigs. And I didn't have that more traditional kind of entry into the poetry world. My poetry career was essentially just handed to me, which I don't think is that common, and I used to almost feel like a little bit ashamed that I hadn't had that traditional gateway into the poetry world. But now I'm just like, well, that's, it's not my fault. But I basically did, I've been writing poetry for years, and one of my friends asked me if I would perform at her gig. She's a musician, and I was like, okay, I'll do it, kind of thing. And from there, that just snowballed, and it just became this much bigger thing, where from that first gig, I was then offered another gig, and then I was then offered another gig, and all of them paid. And before I knew it, within like 3 months, I had this sort of fully launching poetry career. And I took part in a competition, and I was in the finals of this competition, and that led me on to doing other things. And so literally within like 6 months, I had been cast in this big play at the Lyceum Theatre, which is like one of the biggest theatres in Scotland, and from this woman who had just seen me performing. I'd never done any acting or anything in my life. And then shortly after that, I was like invited to perform at this literary festival in Brazil, and I was flown out to Brazil, all expenses paid. And so within 6 months, I was like, oh my god, all of a sudden I had this career that I really wasn't necessarily expecting to have, in that sense. I'd always felt like there would probably come a time where I would be called to share my work, but I didn't know what format that would take or exactly how it would happen. And I didn't chase it. I never chased it. I just allowed things. I unwittingly allowed it to come to me. And I think that's such a powerful thing. And people used to ask me, like, oh, how do you get so many gigs? And I'd be like, I don't know why people come to me asking me to do things. I don't know. But I actually think that part of it is because I wasn't really that bothered about it. Like, I did love it, but I also have always had this love-hate relationship with performance, because I'm not a particularly performy kind of person. I'm very much an introvert. I probably spend most of my time alone, and so there's something about that which calls me very strongly out of my comfort zone. And I'm a Scorpio North Node, so my life's mission is to like constantly be pushing myself out of my comfort zone. But there's also something about it that I find quite draining, and I find it challenging at times to be around a lot of people. And sometimes my audiences are really big. I just performed to an audience of like 1,000 people, and that's a lot, and it's a lot for somebody who isn't particularly extroverted. It's a lot for someone who's very intuitive, who's very psychic. I just had to do this clearing on my own field this morning, because I've been doing so many events recently that I just realized how much of other people's stuff I was picking up, and it just wasn't, it's not very good spiritual hygiene, and you know, I really had to kind of go, okay, like there's something here that feels kind of out of alignment for me, and I get so much more pleasure from my healing work. I get so much more pleasure from connecting with people one-on-one than I do with performance. And although, you know, I'm thankful for the events I've taken part in this week, you know, I've did some chairing for the book festival, and you know, that was totally out of my comfort zone. And then I was also interviewed in a panel and led some writing exercises and stuff as part of another event yesterday. And so, you know, there's something that is good, positive about that, pushing the comfort zone. But then there's also this part of me that feels like, you know, recently, because I've been doing a lot more performance stuff, haven't been able to keep on top of my YouTube as much, haven't been as like, haven't been able to put as much time into like my newsletter and things which really matter to me in this area of my life. And I find it hard to bridge those two areas of my life. And I did a video kind of similar to this, or around similar themes, called Bridging All of You In, and like why that is so important to like show up as you are in all the different areas of your life, to not be one person in this area and one person in that area. And you know, that's still something I'm very much dealing with myself, is like, how do I show up fully, you know? And when I was chairing that event that I did, I just had this like, you know, usually I would introduce myself as a poet and performer, and I was like, I can't do that anymore, because that's not who the fuck I am. Like, I am a mystic. That is the one, you know, obviously we all hold all archetypes within us, and some are more actualized and embodied than others. And for me, the archetype which I embody the most is the mystic. That's just it, you know, that's the one that resonates with me the absolute most, and always has done from being a very, very young child, from as early as I can remember. And so it feels like I do myself a disservice when I say, hi, I'm a poet and performer, because it's like, that's not even what I do most of the time anymore. That's like really not what I do most of the time. Most of the time I'm one-on-one with people, you know, doing that deep psychic level, cosmic level work, you know? So I was just like, I can't fucking do this. Like I was literally, the night before, I was like crying on the phone to my mom, and I was like, I don't want to perform anymore. I don't want to like, you know, and I think that was maybe like a sort of maybe more extreme reaction to how I was feeling, you know. And I've been in this situation before where I took a break from performing for like almost a year because it was just too much, and I was so burnt out, and I wasn't writing anymore, and it just felt like this thing that I had to do for money rather than something I genuinely wanted to do. And what I did then was just go, right, I'm never performing again, and sort of, you know, had almost quite an extreme reaction to that level of burnout. And I suppose now I think what the sort of lesson is like, okay, you don't have to like be as extreme as that and be like, I'm giving it all up, but I can kind of just take a big step back again, you know. And I've got one more performance this week, and then I don't have anything lined up till January. And so I think that feels so light to me, like, oh, I don't have to kind of put myself out there like that again for a good few months, you know. And I think that's where I'm kind of learning to like have a little bit more balance in my life. You know, I'm Libra rising, so balance for me is like a big thing, as it is for, you know, for everyone. And so yeah, it feels to me like I'm just in this space of just, you know, I think you can't, it's that thing of like, you can't spread yourself too thin either. And if I'm doing so much poetry stuff, it's really hard to stay consistent with my, being within the world of mysticism. And at this event that I was chairing, you know, I introduced myself and I said, I'm a mystic who expresses herself through the written and spoken word, because that is far more in alignment with actually who I am. And I just had to kind of sit with the fact that that might make some people uncomfortable because they don't even believe that mysticism is real, and they don't believe that people can be psychic, even though everybody is, and they don't believe that there is anything other than the material world. And you know what? That is totally okay. If that is how they want to live their lives, I'm not going to try and change that, but I'm also not going to change who I am to make other people feel comfortable. And you know what? Maybe I was the only person at the Edinburgh Book Festival that announced themselves as a mystic. And that's totally fucking okay, and I was sort of like, afterwards I was like, fuck, I can't believe I actually did that. Because maybe to people listening to this, it doesn't sound like that big a deal. To me, it's a really big deal to acknowledge that, in a world that is kind of often sits between being heavily religious, dogmatically religious, and being profoundly atheistic. There's often not really a middle ground that allows for that. Well, what about esoteric study? What about, the mystic traditions? What about those? Often people are one extreme to the other. Either they do not believe that there is a God and their religion is science, or they are heavily dogmatic in religions which are very institutionalized. And so when somebody comes in and they're not either of those, they're actually from something which is far more ancient, it can be triggering for people, and even things like when I was, talking to people backstage and things like that, people, oh, what have you been up to? And things like that. And it's just like, well, you know what? I've got my own business and I do energy healing. I do energy work. That's what I do, and not muting that. And, I would, in the kind of recent times, I've tried to just skirt over that, and it's just like, why would I do that? Why would I do that? Because I'm playing small to make others feel more comfortable with what I do. And it's like, fuck that, I'm not doing that anymore. I can't do that. It's exhausting, and when I was crying on the phone to my mom, it was like tears from like the depths of my soul. Like I was like howling, because I was just like, I cannot hide anymore. It's exhausting. And you know what, if people think that I'm crazy, and I think that's the thing when you are very psychic, when you're very much into these realms, the fear, it's that old witch wounding. The fear is that we will be seen as crazy. It's not just like, oh, they're just a bit weird, they're really into, they've got like a sort of obsession with, I don't know, comics or something that's maybe a little bit more alternative, right? It's like you believe that you can talk to the other side. You believe there is another side. You believe there is something else, and that can very much lead to people thinking that you are you are experiencing psychosis, that, the sort of medical, allopathic, Western medicine way of looking at that would be, well, they're experiencing schizophrenia or schizoaffective disorder or something, bipolar. But it wouldn't be, oh yes, well, they're obviously have unlocked these gifts over many, many lifetimes, and that is why they are so open like that, We don't have that viewpoint generally in the West, and so I think that's why it feels so big, is because when you expose those parts of you, you leave yourself open to people thinking that you are mentally ill, which leads, obviously has really big ramifications, or has the potential to have really big ramifications. And so I think that's where the fear comes as well within that. It isn't just and this isn't to minimalize anyone else's experience of this, but it's not just like you're going, yes, I have an unusual hobby. You're going, yes, you might think that I'm absolutely insane, and it takes real strength. Actually, I'm really witnessing that within myself right now. It takes real strength, like digging from the depths of your soul to be like, fuck, yes, this is who I am, and I think that when I started my poetry and performance and all of that kind of stuff, I'd been writing for years about empire. I'd been writing for years about colonialism and racism and things which were very present for me in my life. And I was writing about these things when it was not popular to talk about them. And I lost friends over it. I lost friends. I lost friendships. people thought I was a little bit crazy. And I'm sort of like, this feels like a similar pattern that is playing out, you know. But now everybody talks about that stuff, you know. There's a lot more broader conversation around that kind of thing, you know. And so I think often when you're in these kinds of positions of being like an artist, being a mystic, etc., you're often grasping at things that are slightly ahead of their time, you know. That's what artists do. They feel into things which are slightly ahead, and that's okay, you know. That's totally okay. But it's just that often people will think you're crazy, you know, until that comes around again into the more collective part of the consciousness, you know, until it's more accepted and whatnot. So I think that the overall message with this is like, you know, I'm sure a lot of people that are watching this resonate with me in that they are very sensitive and are interested in these things which may make them appear a little bit unusual to a lot of people. And I know it's really hard, and I know it triggers really deep wounds which you have likely been carrying for lifetimes. But I think we're in a time now where we're really being called to allow for the archetype of the mystic to come back into the foreground of the world that we understand, into the foreground of society, because it used to be that the king would never ever be declared a king until the high priestess had said that he was fit to rule, you know. And the whole culture of communities and societies functioned by and through the wisdom of the crone, the wisdom of the crowned woman, the woman who had completed her menstrual cycle, who had been initiated through her body and through the cosmos over and over and over again, and was now in her, you know, had gone through her menopause and was now the crone, was now the crowned woman. And so I am ushering in, I believe we are part of ushering in that energy again, of allowing for that archetype to come through us all, because we all hold it. We all hold the mystic archetype, and likely if you watch my stuff you probably hold it very strongly. So let your inner mystic shine, allow it to come through you, because it's really needed right now. So thank you for watching this. Thank you for witnessing me. If you've made it to the end, thank you for listening to my story. I just had this burning desire just to share what was going on with me right now. So thank you for watching, and take care. Have the most amazing day.